What up, yo? This is LA Knight, as in Lady Ash Knight of Book Catalot, and I am here to talk to you about Written and Read by Anne Bishop. Now, I've read a lot of Anne Bishop in the past. I read her book Daughter of the Blood when I was like, I don't know, maybe 11. My grandma gave it to me. That was a long time ago, though, so I don't remember exactly when it was. And I really like her books. Sorry if you hear like these weird sucking noises. I have cough drops in my mouth because I do a lot of talking when I'm at work. And if I don't just push through it and talk anyway when I get home, then I'd never do these podcasts. Anyway, so Written and Read is completely different from Daughter of the Blood and the books and the series that book is from. Daughter of the Blood is from Black Jewels, which is a high fantasy that really like inverts the tropes of the fantasy genre. Like in most fantasy, white is good, black is bad, light magic is good and strong, dark magic is evil. Men all have all the power. Women either, wear chainmail bikinis or, hide up in towers and get rescued, or they, wear eagle feathers and tell the future. The Others, on the other hand, see what I did there. Written and Read is the first book in the Others series, and the Others is actually more like an alternate history, magical realism, paranormal. Like, I don't even know how to describe it, because, like, if you say paranormal, most editors are going to think of things like Anita Blake, which actually is pretty close. Anita Blake, or, like, paranormal romances as written by, like, Gina Showalter, or Sherilyn Kenyon, or Kresley Cole, and that's totally not what we're talking about. The Others is a series where instead of humans being the apex predator at the top of the food chain, instead we have this race that long, long ago, back at the dawn of time, managed to split off into different subspecies, and some of them became shapeshifters, and some of them became other things, elementals, and seasonal avatars, and things like that. And the main character, Meg, is what's called a Cassandra Sang, a blood prophet. And she can see the future when she cuts her skin. Now, trigger warning, we are going to be talking about self-harming. And I think actually the way Anne Bishop did it in this series is actually really good, because cutting is shown as not being a good thing. And I know that some series make it seem like they glorify self-harm, and I personally, as a former self-harmer, do not feel that this book did that. However, it can be triggering for some people. I myself was not triggered, but I do understand that some people could be triggered by it. So, with that out of the way, let us continue with this review. So, Written and Read is about how this blood prophet named Meg, and that's actually not her actual name, she doesn't have a name, she gave herself this name, escapes the guy that basically is holding her prisoner as a slave. It's legal in this world to hold blood prophets as property. They are basically slaves because they're considered property. Now, originally the laws that were passed that created this, what they call benevolent ownership, were created to help these girls who had ended up developing an addiction to cutting, but then it ended up being twisted, and now it's basically the people who are owning these girls are abusing them, and that's why Meg ended up escaping. And she ends up going to this place called a courtyard, and a courtyard is a small piece of land inside of a human area where the Others, these shapeshifters and elementals, live. And on this land, human law does not apply. Now, it turns out, actually, as you read the book, you find out the scope of the Others' control of this continent. They're actually in North America, but they don't call it that. The Others literally control everything in North America. Humans are living there as renters, basically. We are living there, we have signed leases, and we can be evicted at any time if we break the rules. This actually happens. Some people in other towns and cities break the rules, they attack the Others, they pollute the land, whatever, and they get evicted. And some of these people have been living there for hundreds of years, and the Others are like, too bad, pack up and leave. And Meg ends up becoming the human liaison, quote unquote, for the Others to the humans. And that sounds like this super huge, lofty title, which comes with like a lot of responsibility, but actually her job is to sort and deliver the mail. Literally, her only job is to accept deliveries from humans and human businesses for the Others, and then deliver them to the appropriate sendees. And you'd think that that would, like, make for no book at all. You would think that. I mean, you would, wouldn't you? You would think that there would be, like, no plot there. But actually, the plot is actually fairly well carried because it's very character driven instead of being event driven. Like, there's actually very little climactic action in these books. In her other series, now she's actually written like 4 series, not counting the others. She's written this series about an incubus named Sebastian, and I haven't read those, but I may read them at some point. I don't know. She's read written the Black Jewels, which I've read. I read all 9 of them. She wrote this other series about elves in Ireland, I think, or something. The Pillars of Light, or something. Never read those. And then she wrote this other series, and I don't know what it's called. I haven't read that one either, obviously. So but from what I understand, because I do know people who have read these books, the books of Anne Bishop that I haven't read, there's always like this climactic battle, because that's usually how you write a book, right? It's like you get to the end and there's the climactic fight scene or the confrontation with the bad guy, and then everything gets fixed. And that is not quite how it happens in this book. In this book, Meg sees, I mean, there is like a climactic fight, but it's a lot less climactic than you would expect, because Meg has seen visions of this event happening. So it's not a surprise. Almost from the beginning, you know it's going to happen. And because she sees these visions, a lot of the really bad things that she thinks are going to happen don't happen. They get averted, which is great. And really, the plot of the book is carried until this final fight by small events around character development. And so you get really invested in these characters like Meg and the leader of the courtyard where she lives, who's this wolf shifter named Simon, and his nephew, who is trapped in wolf form because of a childhood trauma. And the kid's still a kid, but he's been trapped in wolf form for like 2 years. And he can't speak telepathically for whatever reason, and he has not been able to shift back into human form. And there's a vampire, because there are vampires in this book. There's a vampire who is Simon's best friend, and you get to meet him and learn about him. And you meet the elementals who live there. Some of them are asleep because they're seasonal avatars and it's wintertime, so the only one out of the avatars who's awake is Winter. But like Winter and Air are the 2 that you meet, and then later you meet Spring for a few days because Winter wakes Spring up for a reason. There are these ponies, and you think they're just cute little male ponies who deliver the mail, but it turns out they're actually like magical, majestic, elemental steeds who can do all this crazy shit. And so like Avalanche can literally dump snow on people, and Whirlpool can drown people, and whatever. And it's really interesting, like the mythology that she created for this world. And I'm surprised by how easy it is to read, because it is very character driven and there's not a lot going on. I mean, it's all very slow and low key. All the stuff that's going on is like in the background while Meg is making these connections to these characters, and then you as the reader are making them along with her. So I think that's really interesting. The other thing that I really like about this book is the shapeshifters are not like they are in most books with shapeshifters. In most books with shapeshifters, and this I know because I used to read, not so much anymore, used to read a lot of paranormal romance. Shapeshifters usually are humans who can shapeshift into animals, and they think like humans most of the time. And their priorities are human, and they understand human behavior, and they were raised human. And like, there's no question about this. They are human on the inside, even though they have this beast inside them that sometimes makes them act like animals, sometimes. But in the others, you see this when you read from Simon's point of view. He is not a human who can turn into a wolf. He's a wolf who can turn into a human. And so he really struggles a lot to understand how humans work and the way we think and the things that we feel. Like, he doesn't understand some of the conclusions that we are drawn to and the behaviors that we do. He just doesn't get it. And I thought that was really interesting that you have this shapeshifter who is really a shapeshifter. Like, he's not like a human who can turn furry. And, because like in the Anita Blake series by Laurel K. Hamilton, Anita talks about shapeshifters, and when she talks about them, she's like, yeah, shapeshifters are just people who happen to turn furry once a month. And it, like, eventually I think she figures out that actually is not true. And there's a lot more to it than that, but for the first, like, 15 books, that's pretty much how they're described. And in this, it is very obvious from, like, in the first 15 pages, no, that is not how it is. Simon is not a human who turns furry once a month. He's a wolf who sometimes has to look like a human to get shit done. And it sucks. Because he hates it. He hates being in human form. It's not like, the human shapeshifters who are like, oh shit, I'm turning into a werewolf. Ah! And then, like, they go back to being human again. Like, oh, thank goodness. I'm so glad to be normal again. He's like, ugh, I'm stuck in this monkey suit. Gross. And it's really interesting. I thought that was kind of cool. And I'm not going to say that this book is, like, super stellar amazing or anything, but I do like the fact that it takes a lot of things that we have seen in other books, like the shapeshifter thing, and it makes it a little different. And Anne Bishop is actually really good at that. She's really good at taking something that is part of, like, the human folklore, the human pop culture collectiveness, so to speak, like shapeshifters, or like how in magic, dark magic is bad and white magic is good, and, things like that, and then, like, totally flipping them on their head, and I really like that, and so that's why I really like Written in Red. I will say, though, she has this habit, Anne Bishop, of, at least in the Black Jewels and in the others, she has this habit of her male characters are a little bit sexist. They will make comments sometimes that are kind of dismissive of the female characters when the characters are upset about something, or when they actually, yeah, it's when they're upset about something. The male characters sometimes act dismissive, and she even actually tried to address that in Written in Red, but she didn't do it very well. And so that kind of bothered me. I've actually read this book like 3 times. And the first time I read it, I didn't notice this. And the second time I read it, I didn't notice. But this time when I read it, I did actually notice that sometimes the guys make these snide little comments, and it's like, really? Really? And then also the only black woman in the series, or not in the series, I'm sorry, the only black woman in this book is a deadbeat. Not the only black person, but the only black woman in this series, in this book, I don't know why I keep saying series, in this book, is, like, a total bitch. And on the one hand, I know, because I've read the other books in the series before, that we are going to get other black female characters who are not total bitches. And when I say bitch in this instance, I don't mean, like, gung-ho, kick-ass, gonna get shit done. I mean she's a bitch. Like, a bad person bitch. Like, not even nice person like Fish Mooney is a bitch, but she can be nice sometimes. Fish Mooney from Gotham, if you don't know who that is. No, this woman's just a bitch. It takes her having to die for her to stop being a bitch. So, that's an issue. But I still really like the book. Now, again, this book has self-harm in it. I like the fact that the self-harming is not glorified. Meg is an addict. It is very obvious. She even admits it. She is an addict. She is addicted to cutting. Cutting is an addiction. Now, people who are self-harmers know this is true. Self-harming is an addiction. There are reasons why self-harmers self-harm, and one of those reasons is the feeling that it gives you. That feeling can be, and often is, very addictive. And in this, Anne Bishop got that pretty spot on. She kind of made it the addiction, like, she gave the addiction a little metaphysical, magical reason, instead of just making it addictive. But, kudos for trying, and she didn't quite get it, but she didn't miss it by that far of a mark, in my opinion. So I really like the way she handled the cutting, and the fact that Meg is actually an addict, and that people around her acknowledge this and are trying to help, and acknowledge that this is not a good thing. The fact that she is an addict. They acknowledge that this is bad. And I like that. So, but, like, the book is not great. I really enjoyed it, but I think the reason I enjoyed it was less because it's super great, and more because it's super readable. It's very easy to read. It took me, every time I've read it, it took me less than 2 days to read it. So yeah, that's my review of Written and Read, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys later. Bye!